Recently, there have been news that the team that was developing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown was disbanded, and that a sequel to the game was denied by the higher-ups from Ubisoft, along with a potential second expansion. Now, this does not mean that they were fired, or that Ubisoft Montpellier was dissolved like some people thought, because a further clarification from Ubisoft states that the team was just told by higher-ups to stop working on The Lost Crown, and any and all Prince of Persia projects moving forward, and to put their work towards other future titles for Ubisoft. Perhaps even that Rayman remake that I've been hearing rumblings about in the rabid slave mines. I remember the first time I ever played Prince of Persia, and it blew my mind away. I was raised on Nintendo consoles, so most of my gaming experiences were with Mario, Legend of Zelda, Metroid. Prince of Persia was one of the first games that my dad bought for our family GameCube that I couldn't play. My dad would play the combat sections. He said the game was too graphic and that the women weren't wearing enough.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
So he wouldn't let me play those sections. But the sections he would let me play are the platforming sections, where I would run across the wall, swing on poles. It was a great time. These are also memories that I share very closely with my father. So Prince of Persia means a lot to me, and I was really disappointed when I heard about this. But rather than taking the doomer pill, I want to look back at Ubisoft's development history with Prince of Persia and parse out what led to the commercial failure of Lost Crown, and if there's anything that we can learn about it. Is Prince of Persia a series that just can't work in 2024? Or perhaps this is just another example of Ubisoft's constantly screwing over their own franchises? We'll laugh, I'll cry, and I'll explain why Ubisoft screwed over Prince of Persia. Our story starts out in 1989 with one man, Jordan Mechner, who is the sole creator of the original Prince of Persia title. It debuted on the Apple II and was one of the first high-profile examples of an auteur game developer who was solely responsible for creating a game like this. It was a tough-as-nails platformer that pretty much created the cinematic platformer genre, which is more concerned with planning ahead and animation-based movement rather than speed and simplicity, like games like Mario would be. Look at games like Abe's Odyssey and Flashback as good examples of the genre that iterated upon the foundation that Prince of Persia would set up. In fact, all the animations were done by Mechner and his brother, as all the animations were rotoscoped, which is basically a nerdy way of saying that Mechner took live action footage and animated it into a 2D space. Games like Mortal Kombat use this to great effect. You know, art imitating life. Prince of Persia at the time was not a huge hit in America, but it blew up in Japan and Europe, which gave Mechner the means to work on the sequel, The Shadow and the Flame, which was a direct follow-up to the story of the first game. Shadow of the Flame was also lauded as an excellent game and an even better sequel. Fair warning, both of these games are super short, but are tough as nails with huge dedicated speedrunning communities to boot. If you do want to give these games a shot, then prepare to rage a bit. Now this is where things get a little wild. Prince of Persia 3D, the last game in the original timeline, unlike his first two titles, was not solely his creative endeavor, but rather Jordan Mechner was there to approve certain parts of development because he was working on another game at the time. And Prince of Persia 3D was not Jordan's baby, like 1 and 2 were, but it was rather Andrew Pedersen who was leading the project, by Mechner's own admission. Now if you've been paying attention to my footage from the first two games when I talked about them, they are challenging but mostly fair experiences with a focus on clearly laid out platforming challenges. Prince of Persia 3D was not that. It was just a huge confusing mess filled up with the worst 3D jank of the 90s, confusing platforming challenges, and a heavier focus on combat which really did not age well. Ocarina of Time, this game is not.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that? What's that, brother?
And in fact, some might say Prince of Persia had a rough transition into 3D.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Mechner really did not like how Prince of Persia, his baby, was transformed into just another Tomb Raider clone.
The problem with Prince of Persia 3D from the moment it was proposed and on through the early stages, the obvious question to ask was, isn't this just Tomb Raider with baggy pants and a turban? And ultimately, I think in the end, it really was Tomb Raider baggy pants and a turban.
This was his Aliens Colonials Marines, and really chased him away from the gaming sphere at the time. He felt betrayed, and how could he not? At least we still got Prince of Persia harem adventures. In comes Ubisoft Montreal in 2001 when they bought the license to Prince of Persia franchise and wanted to make a new game for a new audience, but they needed Mechner's approval to help make it a reality, since he still owned the IP rights for the series. Look, I don't have time to explain what IP rights and license rights are.
Read, nigga! Read!
According to Mechner, the team at Ubisoft Montreal, who was also working on Splinter Cell at the time, showed Mechner AVIs of certain animation and gameplay demos that showed what a proper Prince of Persia game would look like in 3D.
They had shown me some AVIs that they had done the past couple of weeks before, and these were really quick AVIs. They didn't focus on the look of the world or any graphic kind of bells and whistles. They were very crude and had an animated character running up a wall, jumping onto a ladder. Just very quick little demos of the kind of gameplay they had in mind. The great innovation that was already apparent was that there was a guy who could run on walls. They had really taken the dynamic of Prince of Persia 1, which was a 2D side-scroller, and brought it vertically into a 3 dimension, which was something I hadn't done in any Tomb Raider style action-adventure game.
Mechner was so excited that Ubisoft seemed to have a fresh vision for the series that really spoke to him and led him to not only approve the game, but also come in to write the story and help develop the game in some major ways.
What a twist!
Prince of Persia: Sands of Time would release in November of 2003 with around 150 different versions being developed, but the final version would hit the store shelves, and it was a massive hit. To say that Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time was a success would be a complete understatement, as not only did it sell well, but it reviewed well, with winning several Game of the Year awards in 2003, and even some in technical achievements, and it is considered to be one of Ubisoft's best artistic achievements at the time, and even to this very day. They translated the original 2D adventures to 3D perfectly by taking the fundamentals of the series and really pushing the game series forward gameplay-wise.
The Prince of Persia was really born as a 40 pixel high silhouette. You know, he was running and jumping and dodging traps before I knew what his name was or what his story was.
Thought the game could be. And when actually Jordan was here and when he was watching what we had, the whole team, 7 core members and I, were watching himself watching the mock-up, and he was so flabbergasted.
I saw the enthusiasm and excitement and the new ideas that they had. I was convinced that they were really going to do something good, and I also knew that this was a project that I wanted to be a part of.
You can run on walls and swing on poles, which are acrobatic moves that just feel natural in a 3D space, with wall jumps and wall ejects being welcome additions as well. They even incorporate time rewind as a game mechanic and makes the 3D platforming more forgiving, which was a major flaw with the Prince of Persia 3D game, as players would constantly fling themselves to their doom in 3D.
I see you in 3D!
Through the combat, you can jump over and through enemies with stylish slow-mo and artistic camera angles, which just ooze the cinematic quality that Mechner always wanted for his Prince of Persia games. Goes to show what happens when developers and publishers at Ubisoft both push the game forward rather than hold it back. Now, for the next 2 years, we got Warrior Within and Two Thrones, which were both great titles in their own right, but were planting seeds that would later hurt Prince of Persia's brand, and were emblematic of some of Ubisoft's core issues moving forward as a publisher and a developer. Warrior Within was a pretty impressive game at the time, having this pseudo-open world that is very open-ended, with multiple paths to take and secrets to find. Reminds me a lot of Metroid Prime at the time. The tone change and the voice actor change was odd, but overall it was a welcome change, as it showed a logical progression from the ending of the first game, showing that this prince has really grown up. Things are getting serious, and only Godsmack could sell the teenage angst seeping through every single pore of this game.
Marry her? After all, she is a Maharaja's daughter. A conquered one, but still. Her blood is royal. Besides, what better way to tame her insolence? It's not so bad for a woman to have a little spirit. It's a challenge!
You will never reach our shores alive.
For your sake, you better hope I don't. You bitch!
The combat had more depth added, and they had these really intense chase sequences that just felt super cinematic at the time and really tested your skills. Overall, people really liked Warrior Within, but there were some sanded edges and some cut corners that would lead to the world's worst sandpaper cut ever. What am I even saying anymore? Sands of Time, Warrior Within, and Two Thrones were all developed year after year after year as a trilogy, with Two Thrones being particularly bad, with only 9 months of active development due to the original version of Two Thrones being scrapped for technical issues and the dark tone, which was not what Ubisoft wanted the series due to criticism from Warrior Within.
You bitch!
Oh, profanity!
It was originally called Kindred Blades, and was going to be a more ambitious open world type game with a day and night cycle, multiple endings based on your actions, and 2 playable characters, the Prince and the Dark Prince. Now, it can be debated if this game would have been a good fit for the series, as the dark tone in Warrior Within was a point of criticism for some fans. But what we do know for a fact is that this is an example of Ubisoft wanting to maintain a yearly schedule for Prince of Persia rather than letting their game developers make a good game with proper time management. Now, Two Thrones is not a bad game at all. I don't want that impression to get off at all. I think it's a good game in its own right, and it maintained a bunch of concepts of the original concept for the project, including the Dark Prince character, which acted as a rage mode for the Prince, and the stealth kills, which made it in as QuickTime events, but it still felt that we lost something in the mix. There's this feeling when playing through the game that huge chunks and pieces of this game are missing, and that I'm just playing a Frankenstein version of what could have been. The vision for Prince of Persia was sacrificed so they can maintain a yearly schedule for one of their hit franchises, which was only the beginning. After Two Thrones, Prince of Persia was kind of barren for the next 3 years, with only a Lego Battles looking ass game.
You got rid of that old yee ass haircut you got, you get some bitches on your dick.
And a remake of the original Prince of Persia, which is the literal definition of meh. In 2006, concept art of the new Prince of Persia game would be leaked, and in May of 2008 we would be introduced to the new Prince of Persia game called Prince of Persia.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.
I hate the game industry sometimes. It would be a soft reboot of the series that would focus more on the story and platforming of the series rather than the combat and dark tone. For all intents and purposes, the game did reasonably well with having sales that matched the Sands of Time and being pretty well received all around for its presentation and its commitment to storytelling. Although the game was not without its snags, those being the fact that you can't die in this platformer as your main partner in crime, Elika, which basically just replaces your love interest from the first Sands of Time game, cannot and will not let you die, no matter how much you want to taste the sweet, sweet dirt.
Healing spell.
Ah!
Healing spell. Healing spell.
Just let me die, Brian!
Seriously, you can fling yourself in every which direction and she will just not let you die. The game also got rid of the fluid and visceral combat system from Sands of Time Trilogy that evolved over time, that encouraged smart play and creative combos, but rather focus on one-on-one duels that feel more like a rock, paper, scissors game rather than like an action game like Devil May Cry or even God of War. Not to reopen an old wound, but even the expansion to this game ruined the ending for their first title in a reboot series, which was just embarrassing.
That's the end of my story. They say I went completely off the rails and that I'm not responsible for my actions.
Now, I want to make it clear that these fumbles in the game design are most likely a result of Ben Matz, who may or may not be my gaming nemesis.
My God, that's amazing! You are so talented! Huh? Wait a second. Something's not right here. You were just making it look like you were playing. You're a phony! Hey, this guy's a great big phony!
Who has been very open about the development of this game and the creative choices he had for this game. Ben Matz also was the producer for Batman Arkham Origins, which shows a trend of Ben wanting to focus more on story than on engaging gameplay.
Oh yeah.
it's all coming together.
Arkham Origins borrowed its gameplay from City. Prince of Persia just had to get all cute and make an all-new gameplay style. I could be here all day talking about how Ben Matz looks like he works for Chuck E. Cheese's. But in the end, I just don't think he understood what made Prince of Persia such a great game series. It's the story you tell through the gameplay, not the other way around. And one of Ubisoft's rising series at the time would prove its replacement very soon. Now, I cannot stress this enough. When Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed 2 showed up on the scene, it changed everything within the company. Why would you want to create one of these games or an experimental game when you can divert all your attention to this game series, which is outperforming literally everything in their catalog? The true irony of this is that Assassin's Creed was originally going to be a Prince of Persia game called Prince of Persia Assassin, which would follow the prince's bodyguard rather than the prince. The main director and architect for the Assassin's Creed franchise was Patrice Desaletes, which was the game director for Sands of Time. Not to add insult to injury, Ubisoft, but Patrice isn't working for you anymore because you refuse to let him create his trilogy on his terms. History really does repeat in cycles. Prince of Persia had one last chance to prove itself worthy to be a series that Ubisoft could actually nurture, with the return of the Sands of Time trilogy with the Forgotten Sands.
I need a drink.
It would be an interquel between Sands of Time and Warrior Within, which would fill in necessary gaps between the games, as there was a time gap between Sands of Time and Warrior Within, while the prince's attitude and outlook changed between the games. Maybe explain where the prince got his fascination for Linkin Park and Nine Inch Nails.
Oh yes, the Edge.
Sadly, all we got was this bastard son of a Prince of Persia game.
Yeah, that's one fine looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
Where do I even begin? Now, if you've been paying attention, there are several problems wrong with this game right off the bat. This does not look like the prince at all. Who is this man? What has he done to my boy?
I don't know you!
Originally, Forgotten Sands was going to be a game tie-in to the movie, which did not perform well for a variety of reasons. I could talk about for hours in all the ways this film sucked, perhaps another time. How it didn't understand Prince of Persia, and how it was just an attempt by Disney to have another Prince of the Caribbean in its belt. Yeah, how about you faithfully adapt the games rather than turning the prince into another Jack Sparrow, Disney? Why did they give the prince a name anyways? And who's this bitch? Sorry. I just get mad when I see women. The second major issue is that the game development was a massive disaster, with it originally being based on the movie. But the movie was delayed, so it was Frankenstein into being parts of the Sands of Time continuity and being separated from the movie. We were derived of a Jake Gyllenhaal prince. What a shame. Almost every port of the game would be different, with different studios developing the game, and the game felt more like a God of War clone rather than a Prince of Persia game. They were following trends, not setting them, unlike what Sands of Time did back in 2003, and even the reboot kind of paved its own path. Not to mention that having the prince redesigned to look like this guy. Furthermore, it wasn't even a sequel to the reboot of Prince of Persia, which was honestly a shame. Even though I personally didn't like the gameplay style, I still think it had a lot of story potential. Also, I feel that I don't have to mention this to a giant mega games company, but don't release a struggling series right next to Mario Galaxy 2, Red Dead Redemption, and Alan Wake.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Yeah, this game was fighting with the heavyweights, and they thought they would put a struggling series next to these guys?
Why?
But it seems Ubisoft still hasn't learned that lesson quite yet. Can we stop blaming poor sales on a series being unsustainable? Instead, maybe it's your incompetence as a publisher as to why the game is failing. I've heard some people over the years try to call this game a hidden gem, but don't waste your time. This is no Sands of Time. We don't have any official sales numbers, but we can assume it was pretty bad considering the game series went on ice for over a decade. And my rule of thumb is that if I can't find sales numbers for a game, it probably wasn't that good. Now let's recap what happened to the Prince of Persia series so far. Developers who are given time to create a good game will make a good game. Ubisoft meddling with development and making development times into insane crunch times are hurting the series. Splitting development and hinging the fate of your series on a video game movie instead of prioritizing the video game part of video games. Misunderstanding the core appeal to Prince of Persia and moving away from the gameplay fundamentals of the series. Prince of Persia did not fail because it was bad. or it was broken goods, but because Ubisoft sought bigger profits rather than letting their talented developers make a good game. You can trace almost all dead series to this one problem of the publishers not caring about the series and wanting them to adapt to current trends rather than making a game that their fans actually want. Look at a game like Hitman Absolution. It looked to follow trends instead of setting its own path. This of course leads us to Ubisoft's latest example of why they should never be allowed at the adult dinner table ever again.
And you can't piss on hospitality. I won't allow it!
Now, back when I first saw that Ubisoft was going to bring back Prince of Persia with the Lost Crown game, I was excited, but worried. It looked stylish, unique, and fun, but I had a lingering thought in my mind. How is Ubisoft gonna mess it up this time? Well, Ubisoft, you impressed me. You really did. They did it. They showed me how poorly they can handle a release of a 2D Metroidvania in current day, which should be studied for centuries to come.
Jesus Christ, what have you done?
To get this out of the way, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is an excellent game. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It is quite possibly one of the most solid and most quality 2D Metroidvania titles I have played in quite a long time. But the platforming is difficult but super rewarding, and the exploration is just amazing, with so many different biomes and worlds to see. Not to mention the combat, which is seamlessly both engaging and breathtaking, with some of the most stylish animated cutscenes in the industry. Even the boss battles for this game are exquisite, and are some of the most entertaining boss fights I think I've ever played in video games, period. Now, the first major issue with Lost Crown is that it is a Metroidvania. But wait, didn't you just praise it for being an excellent Metroidvania, Bolt? Thanks for paying attention.
He shouldn't die. Yes, fuck you.
Yeah, that's true, but you have to understand, being good is not good enough when it comes to being successful in a market that is saturated with good Metroidvanias. Why would you risk buying a Ubisoft game in current day, which has a certain stigma attached to it, for $40 when you can get games like Nine Souls, the Ori games, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, Animal Well, Dead Cells, or motherfreaking Hollow Knight? All of these games are cheaper than the Lost Crown and have a better reputation than Ubisoft, and are most importantly are on Steam. Steam churns out these games almost daily. Oh, didn't I mention it before? My bad. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. Let me repeat that. They didn't release the 2D Metroidvania game on Steam. I've seen so many games suffer because they refuse to release on Steam, due to the publishers thinking that it's a great idea to ally themselves with Epic Games, or God forbid, release it on their own proprietary launcher. I don't know how to make it even more clear that if you don't release your game on PC on Steam, then expect to fail. I don't like being harsh about this. Whenever I hear that an Epic exclusive is selling below expectations and didn't even recoup its budget, that sucks. When professionals in the very own industry that you're participating in call out your terrible business practices over and over again, and you don't listen, then at some point you need to take stock and decide whether or not you want to compete in this industry.
Leave me alone!
Ubisoft obviously gets the message, as it recently released Assassin's Creed Mirage at half off, and even Star Wars Outlaws is coming to Steam 3 months after launch, which is just embarrassing. Where's the bravado now, Ubisoft? Thankfully, Prince of Persia: Lost Crown is on Steam right now, but that still doesn't solve the problem. Look, I do have somewhat of a sweet spot for Ubisoft. I grew up with them. I loved tons of their games growing up, and they used to make really good games. Not just really good games, some of my favorite games ever made. Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, Beyond Good and Evil, the Rayman games, all some of my favorites. They have talented developers, talented artists who create some of the most memorable experiences in video games. Prince of Persia is not and has never been a dead series. They just refuse to nurture it and give it the time it needs to be successful. Instead, they give attention to Assassin's Creed over and over again, thinking Assassin's Creed is what's going to lead them out of the hole that they've dug for themselves. If Ubisoft wants their games to succeed, they need to nut up and make good games that aren't filled with microtransactions, bugs, and terrible business practices. There will be no sequel, no more expansion, and the team is disbanded, but not because people don't like or care about Prince of Persia. Prince of Persia has failed at every step, not because it's Prince of Persia, but because it's saddled with Ubisoft. Ubisoft is everything that is wrong with them, and if they can't handle the heat, then get out of the kitchen. Thanks for taking the time to watch my silly little video on Prince of Persia, and if you have any thoughts or you want to share some of your favorite experiences or maybe a favorite Prince of Persia game, share it down below. That's about all I have for today, so have a great day. See you next time. Bye!